It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. The move continues. As you know, we've moved everything a few blocks down the road, still here in River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world. And really busy day yesterday. I don't know how people with jobs live the rest of their lives. I mean, I don't know how people deal. I mean, thanks to the pandemic, I haven't worked since March. So I've been able to actually get things done. I don't remember how I ever got anything done when I had a job. You know, that reminds me of something I saved. Somebody named Johnny Hallman posted this, and I could relate to it, so I saved it. Still have no idea how people can, there's a checklist below, work a full-time job, cook dinner often, exercise regularly, enjoy weekends, keep the apartment clean. Seems basic, but I can't consistently do it. Now, somebody who identifies as Shine a Light replies, current full-time 40-hour-a-week jobs aren't designed for single people to do this. They are post-war relics and depend on the unpaid labor of a spouse for cooking, cleaning, shopping, etc. You're not deficient for not being able to do it yourself. Yeah, you know, I think that's a very good point. That's a very good point. It's this sort of constant state of brainwashing we're in. Now, this brings us to something a little larger, and here I saved this right alongside it. This is someone who posts as AKA Verity Reynolds. I feel the need to explain something to the generation that does not remember or never saw a world where one person with a high school education could support a family of 5 comfortably. This was real for millions of U.S. families. It was normal. It was stolen from you. And then someone called ElfRec follows up. First, let me go to the bottom of ElfRec's post for an important note regarding what they wrote. This was never everyone. You know, this family of 5 they're talking about who could live a nice life. It wasn't everyone, but it wasn't the rare 1% either. It was what showed up on all the TV sitcoms and drama shows because it was so common. You could use it as a backdrop without explaining anything. All right, so that's the footnote that I wanted to put up front, so we just understand that it wasn't everybody. But now let me read you the post itself. And it was not where one person left for work at 4 a.m., worked 2 jobs, returned home after 8 p.m. entirely exhausted. No, it was one person, went to work at 8 or 9, came home at 5 or 6, ate food, paid bills, watched TV, celebrated birthdays with parties, and so on. And a few times a year, they all went on a modest vacation, like a weekend visit to relatives in a nearby state, and visited an amusement park while they were there. Also, in summer, they went to the state fair, all 5 of them, maybe a couple of times. They went out to movies a couple times a month. That wasn't the exotic, living the dream lifestyle. That was the boring, humdrum, what everyone does lifestyle. And again, the writer recognizes, and I want to emphasize, that was not everyone, but it was a hell of a lot of people. It was millions and millions and millions of people, families. That was my family. My dad worked 1 job, normal hours. My mom was the stay-at-home. Now, let's be real clear here. Nobody's saying we want to go back to the woman providing all the unpaid labor. No. But the fact is that if this was possible then yes, it was stolen from you. This life was stolen from you. And there's no reason in this world why a family couldn't have the same experience with a stay-at-home dad, or with each parent working 20 hours a week instead of 40. Now, depending on who you are, you may recognize this lifestyle. Either you had it as a kid, maybe you have it now as a parent. Not saying it doesn't exist, but it used to be so very common. And yes, it was stolen from us. We've all been the frogs in the pot of boiling water. It just happened a little bit by bit as governments got more corporate friendly and less family friendly. Union busting, corporate tax cuts, capital gains tax cuts. The whole story, from Reagan through Clinton, Gingrich's contract with America, just pretty much a straight line, right through to today. And again, remember, we're not talking about the one percenters here. There've always been rich folks, and they're getting along just fine. They always have, and they always will. We're talking about the masses and masses, hundreds of millions of Americans, whose numbers have shrunk to this very small bubble of Americans. I mean, do you know anybody like this? A family of 5, 2 parents, 1 job, reasonable hours, everybody taken care of. Take a trip a couple times a year. Go to the movies, go out to eat occasionally. All on 1 job. Do you know anybody like this? It's really made me think in these last few weeks of moving. You know, moving's a big deal. It's labor intensive. It's time intensive. You got things to do. I got a whole list. Take a load over to Goodwill, maybe buy some things I need for the new place, organizing the move itself, all the unpacking and the arranging, change of address, blah, blah, blah. There's just always things to do. I can't imagine how I would have accomplished this if I had to go to a job. It's like the pandemic has afforded me this luxury. I tell you, I don't know how you're doing, but 2020 just changed my life completely. Everybody's got a story, I guess. Mine is on March 16th when I'm sitting at home thinking, well, okay, I wonder if I'm ever going to go out and gig again. Because I made my living out in bars and restaurants. I'll be damned if I'm going to spend any time out in bars and restaurants. And I know people are still trying to do it, but they're one of the most dangerous places you can be. And I personally don't want to participate in spreading the virus, let alone getting it myself. So I made the decision to go ahead and take my early Social Security. I'm lucky. I was old enough. I just met the threshold. The unemployment that the CARES Act provided got me through a few months, and I set up my Social Security, and now I'm getting that check. So one of the reasons I moved, I downsized. I didn't need that big old house anyway. It was too much. So now it's just an entirely new life than from where I was a year ago. It's completely transformed. I got a nice little apartment with a beautiful home studio from where I'm talking to you now, looking out over the cityscape of Milwaukee and the lakefront. I'm lucky. I'm so lucky. And I'm completely aware of how lucky I am. And how grateful I am for the people who fought for the Social Security I'm able to collect now. It wasn't that long ago. There was no such thing. And my heart just goes out to people of all ages. Young people just getting started. Young parents with kids. Empty nesters. What a tough time that can be. In your 40s and 50s, when you're not lucky like me, you're not old enough to collect that check, you're still expected to go out and make a living. And there's economic depression because of the pandemic. And you've still got a mortgage and bills and maybe kids in college. You got a house you're still paying for. I can't imagine what people are going through. What a burden for people. And it's so maddening because none of it is necessary. It's not just the nature of things. This is a man-made system. And I use the word man intentionally here. This is a man-made system, economic, political system. None of this economic hardship is necessary. Cars lined up for miles and miles to get a few bags of groceries. People risking their lives to go out and work in a pandemic because they have no choice. They have to pay their rent. They have to feed their kids. I mean, this stolen life I was talking about, that's pre-pandemic. That's not even counting COVID. But even with the pandemic, the hardship is still not necessary. There's plenty of money. There are plenty of resources. There's plenty to go around. It's just all about who's controlling it and it's all about who decides how and when it gets distributed. Again, man-made systems, decisions. There's nothing handed down from God here, even amidst the pandemic. There's no reason we all couldn't just hunker down while treatments and vaccines were developed. We could have done it. We've talked about it on this program many times. Plenty of resources. But the people in charge just weren't having it. And by the people in charge, I mean the people who need the profits to keep rolling. The big headline yesterday was that the Dow passed 30,000 points for the first time, which is just such a sad and pathetic and evil joke on all of us. The investor class, they're doing great. I love how the Orange Menace dragged his fat ass out to the press room to take credit for it, as though it's some great thing to be proud of. Yeah, okay, well, record unemployment and food banks stretched to the limit. Who cares? And the people who seem to know about these things, all the analysts are saying, well, it's primarily due to the fact that the election is finally over, and with the GSA handing the keys over to the Biden transition team, and then Biden rolling out his economic appointments, Yellen at Treasury, Wall Street really was pretty happy about all of that. They're very happy to have a President Biden. They're very happy to have a Secretary Yellen. And it had little or nothing to do at all with the Orange Menace. But of course, he has to come out and take a bow. And, that brings me to another reason. I don't know, I'm a little down today. I'm a little down. And that was kind of a little bit of a kick yesterday when I read how pleased Wall Street is with Joe Biden and his new economic team. Because it only serves as a reminder that the path we've been on since Reagan was steady as she goes. Pro-corporate, pro-profit, anti-worker, anti-family, economic hardship. The very thing that sows division, fear, the very circumstances that bring rise to flirtations with nationalism, isolationism, fascism. When there's economic hardship, there's blame to be tossed around. Immigrants, racial resentments. When economic hardship is ignored, crime is a consequence. When for-profit entities are preferred over the commons in all aspects of life, the health sector, education, criminal justice, these areas especially, when profit is the driving force, these institutions no longer serve us, but just become part of the pattern of oppression. So we were well on this path. We have been for 40 years. And then the Orange Menace comes along, the most over-the-top, in-your-face standard bearer for this winner-take-all dystopia, with all the jingoism and racism and misogyny just baked in. He was a big enough and buffoonish enough character that he scared all the regular folks. It was no longer just me and my lefty buddies shouting into the abyss, charging at windmills. No. Now most of the country was alarmed. So it was nice to have your company for a while. It was nice to have your company for 4 years, when some of us have been outraged for 40 years. It got bad enough you joined us. You joined the chorus. But now I'm a little worried. Because as happy as I am, and believe me, I am happy that he's been vanquished, now we got Joe. And Wall Street is happy. And we'll just put this train right back on its tracks, going in the same damn direction. So I'm concerned. My feed, my social feed, has changed. I don't even recognize it anymore just in the last couple of days. Just in the last couple of days. You all have just gone silent. Couple of happy little posts. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Don't we just love Joe and Kamala? Things are Things are going to be so great now. There's not even any anger at the Orange Menace anymore. Don't see any of that, which is actually fine. I don't need to see his mug. We don't really need to talk about him that much, except we can never forget. We're in one of those never forget kind of moments here. We can never forget the path we were on and the one we continue. We can never forget how close we came to full-out, full-blown nationalism, fascism. We have to be completely aware that the great majority of the deplorables don't even believe that he lost the election. 77% was the number I saw in the press yesterday. We are not out of the woods. We are not out of the fire swamp. And there are still rodents of unusual size to be avoided and to be defeated. So I'm not here to bring anybody down. I'm very glad that Joe Biden is going to be president and the Orange Menace is not. Believe me. But I'm asking you, stay with us. Stay with us, all right? Stay in the fight, would you? Could you? Many of us have been crying bloody murder for 40 years. Seeing the path. Understanding the direction. None of that has changed. That has not changed. And it really hit me again last night. I told you I had a very full day. Sat down with the TV box last night. And I watched Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates Jr. Have you seen that on PBS? Great series. It was the one they did with Bernie Sanders and Larry David. And the Bernie Sanders segment was really poignant because he discovered that his uncle was killed by the Nazis in Poland in a particularly brutal story. And prior to that, his father and his uncle had suffered great hardships at the hands of the Nazis. And Bernie was visibly moved by this. And he and Gates are having this conversation about how just unfathomable this is. And Bernie says at one point, this just reaffirms why I got into politics in the first place. So that this sort of thing could never happen again. So that we can create the kind of a world that treats everyone with respect, gives everyone opportunities, that doesn't go down this path. Bernie is just distraught at this story, at this family story he's learning for the first time about his father and his uncle, which he was unaware of. And he's just aghast at the depth, the level of brutality of which humans are capable. Now, I happen to believe if a few thousand votes had gone a few different ways in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, we might be living in a very different world right now, where our journey down that path had been accelerated. I mean, pedal to the metal. Full-blown corporate fascism. With all the attending misogyny, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all of it in full flower. That was our destiny if the Orange Menace had been able to pull this thing off. It was actually quite a night of TV viewing last night because following that program was their series, PBS series, Rise of the Nazis, which covered the couple of years prior to the death of von Hindenburg and the complete takeover of Hitler, and how Hitler had to maneuver both the right-wing elites on one front and the stormtroopers, his base, on the other front. And the comparisons, you don't need much of an imagination when they talk about right-wing elites to think about the Republican Party, those who will go along to get along. They talk about the stormtroopers and the base. No imagination required to think about the deplorables and the Proud Boys at all. And then my evening of television concluded with the Frontline documentary, Supreme Revenge, Battle for the Court. in which we see the Republican Party go off the deep end in their partisan manipulation of the Supreme Court. And of course, Mitch McConnell is the central character of that documentary. And his only concern is power. His one and his only mission is pure, raw power. If you know anything about Mitch McConnell, he has no issues. He doesn't offer legislation. He's not a legislator. He's a power broker. That's all it is for him. So I worry. And I want you with us on this fight. I can't tell you how many times people laughed in my face when I cried these kind of warnings through the 80s and 90s and the O's as we were chugging further and further and faster down this road. Well, people aren't laughing anymore. And if you don't think the United States is capable of reaching that level of brutality that put tears in Bernie Sanders' eyes, you don't think we're capable of that? You don't think KKK is capable of that? Proud Boys are capable? Standing back and standing by, just ready, just champing at the bit to be American stormtroopers and the triumphant return of Trump in 2024. You think I'm being overly dramatic? You think this is some sort of dystopian fantasy? There are too many examples all around the globe throughout history to think it could never happen again and that it could never happen here. The election of Joe Biden is a pump on the brakes, but that's all it is. That is all it is. Well, let me close with a couple of quick little stories. The Wisconsin recount continues here in my home state. And you've probably heard some of this on the news, but headline CNN, "It's wild down here." That's a quote. The Milwaukee County recount in Wisconsin won't be finished until after Thanksgiving, after a slower than expected start. Apparently they've had all sorts of trouble with the Trump observers. They're harassing the counters, violating social distance rules, telling them what to do, bullying them. A couple of them had to be kicked out. I guess it's a wild scene down there. But they're getting it done. It's going slower than it ought to, but they're getting it done. And in the midst of this, of course, a Republican group is suing to stop the Wisconsin vote certification. Because if you're not going to win at Monopoly, you got to just toss the board, right? That's the state they're in now. So they're going to ask the Wisconsin Supreme Court to block certification of the election results. Now, I laugh because it's a ridiculous notion, but it is the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, so you never know what those jokers are going to do. But this is just more sort of Giuliani-type Hail Marys. Stitched together some ridiculous lawsuit to just literally throw out every ballot. No, we would just like the state legislature to do this and to choose new electors. And, Supreme Court, could you force the Democratic governor to comply? Yeah, so there's no way this is going to pass. But just so you know, these are the kinds of people who are still out there. People in suits, people with law degrees. Oh, and this is good. I like this. 386 uncounted ballots turned up. Now, in any kind of a recount, this is completely normal. It's due to human error. A bag got put behind a table or something. You know, these things happen. It happens in every election, in every state, in every city. I mean, come on. You realize what a big job it is to count millions and millions and millions of votes, right? You're going to have little mistakes like this. For as long as there have been elections, there have been these kinds of mistakes. So don't see this headline and go, oh my goodness. Out of millions of ballots cast, you're going to have a couple hundred here and there that it's going to happen. It just always happens. And it never makes any big difference. Now, of course, you don't want it to happen, and I'm glad they found them. But the ballots that were lost were in Milwaukee, which went for Biden by a, 2-1 margin. So you can only assume, or at least guess, that those nearly 400 uncounted votes will go 2-1 for Biden. So what is that? I'm going to do math in my head again. I hate it when I have to do math in my head. Let's see, 130. So, okay, Joe's going to build his lead by about 250 votes. That's the thing about these recounts. It's kind of fun. Typically, the person who was ahead increases their lead just by a little bit because that's just the way math works. So on all the recounts, Joe just wins again. So that's kind of a nice thing about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Georgia. We get to see the Orange Menace lose multiple times. Well, that's kind of fun. And when they adjust the numbers slightly, oh yeah, Joe got a couple hundred more, actually. So keep the recounts coming. Yeah, up to 80 million votes now for Joe. Man. Oh, and then one last thing about this Wisconsin recount. This is going back to last Wednesday, a week ago today. I just had to share this with you. The Wisconsin Elections Commission had this big old all-night meeting where they fought with each other, the Republicans and Democrats, big fights about the procedure of the recount, and you can't change the rules after the request has been made, and it was a terrible scene and very unpleasant. But Board Chair Ann Jacobs had the quote of the year. She said, Mr. Trump's allegation that election clerks mailed thousands of absentee ballots to voters who hadn't requested them was absurd, she said. Factually bizarre and a vague, paranoid conspiracy. And here's the quote of the year. What we ought not be doing is watering that plant of baloney. She said. I'm going to add that to my lexicon. I'm going to add that to my personal lexicon. Let's not water that plant of baloney. How Wisconsin is that? I can tell you, as a person from Wisconsin, that is a quintessential Wisconsin phrase and just brilliantly put. Yeah. Let's not water that plant of baloney. Okay. So I leave you now on this Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It's not too late to change your plans. If you were planning on breaking the rules and joining other families, don't do it. Don't do it. Please, please limit your gathering to only people in your household. Begging you. It's not too late to change your plans. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Oh, speaking of Thanksgiving, tomorrow in this space, we'll be airing our Thanksgiving special. It's a pre-COVID special, so people are getting together in our little show. It's a little bit like the Halloween special we did for you a few weeks ago. Tomorrow, got a nice little Thanksgiving presentation for you. A little radio theater. Some fun stuff. All right. Have a great day. We'll talk to you on Friday. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.